Hey everybody, good evening. It's Shannon Graham Cornell from Better Home Organizing, and it's day 11 out of 31, so we're making good progress. Happy to be with you this evening. For tonight, I actually want to spend a little bit of time talking about a subject that is near and dear to my heart as an organizer who specializes in helping people declutter. In addition to getting organized, I feel as though decluttering is a really important part of the process. So I want to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about technically six, I guess, but 5 ways of helping us think through and reframe the decision-making process that is decluttering. So one of the most difficult things, really, I think, for most people about getting organized is dealing with our clutter, dealing with that extra stuff that's in our house that, have all kinds of issues surrounding them. We may be keeping them out of a feeling of guilt or out of a sentimentality. We might be keeping them because, who knows, someday we might need it, or I'm going to keep it just in case. We also may be keeping it just because we don't know how to get rid of it appropriately. We don't know where it's going. Another reason too is it may be that we're very aware of the cost of the item when we first purchased it, and so it feels like a waste of money. So there's a lot of issues that we encounter as we declutter. And thinking through some of those things can be tricky, especially when you know it's something that you don't use. It doesn't have a meaningful or doesn't serve a meaningful purpose in your life now, but it's still very difficult. Peter Walsh, who is an organizer who's been around forever, and I really enjoy his work, but he has a quote that I love, which is, "Stuff has power." And that's so true. And so one of the things when we're decluttering that can be helpful is thinking about different ways of reframing that in our minds. Thinking through, how do we know we want to let go. We know we want our space to have fewer things in it, but how do we actually make that happen when we're confronted with this thing that we really are struggling to get rid of? And so we're going to talk about 5 different ways you could possibly think about that may help ease that letting go process. So a really good example, and technically this is my 6th one I'm sneaking in, but it's a great example for today because it's a very, very popular concept. And it is a really good example of what I'm going to be talking about, which is Marie Kondo's concept that she is known for. She's the author of The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and she also has a brand new show on Netflix that just dropped at the beginning of this year. And so Kondomania is out there, and people are talking about her work and watching her show, and donation centers and thrift stores and consignment stores are reporting that they're getting just so much stuff that they more than they've gotten in the past. And so it's being attributed to that idea, or to her work. But her key concept is, when we are looking at our objects, do they spark joy? And that's a way of thinking about, I'm holding this object. Is it bringing me happiness? Is it sparking joy? Or am I just keeping it because of all those other things that I was just talking about? Guilt, sentimentality, don't know what to do with it, etc. So that's a really good example that's very popular today. It's not only talked about a lot, it's also satirized a lot, which is kind of funny. But because it is an extreme, her method of doing the decluttering and the organizing is a fairly extreme method. But that idea of asking questions about your objects rather than just taking an object at face value is a really good effort to go through. But spark joy may not be the right one for you. So I want to suggest 5 other ones that could be helpful in thinking through decluttering. So one option is to decide, and it's an arbitrary decision, but to decide for a particular category of item. Decide where it is you want that item to live, and then let the space determine the limits of how many of those things you keep. So one of the examples that I can share from my life is when we moved into our townhouse, we decided that we were going to designate half of a shelf in our kitchen to drinking glasses. And we are, as I've shared in the past, my husband and I are both very into craft beer. And so one of our hobbies is brewing our own beer, and also getting to sample craft beers. And so we actually have a large collection of pint glasses. And we decided when we moved in that those were going to be our primary drinking glasses. So one of the things that we did was we said, you know what, but we had way too many of them. We had doubles of them. We had so many of them. So what we did was we said, you know what, we're going to let this half shelf be the limit of how many pint glasses we actually keep. And so we decluttered down to that space. In other cases, even much larger collections, you could say, you know what, I have this top shelf of a china cabinet. I had a client that did this, top shelf of a china cabinet. I love wine glasses. They are beautiful. The ones that she had were particularly pretty. They were painted, and she decided that was what she wanted to dedicate to that part of her belongings. And so that was the spot for wine glasses. And the rule was, once we hit the limit of that space, no more. So letting the physical confines of a space to help you determine when too much is too much can be a really useful strategy. Another one is this game, I guess, of friends, acquaintances, and strangers. And this was actually a concept that was developed by Judith Kohlberg, who is a pioneer in organizing, and particularly in working in the space of chronic disorganization and working with ADD and ADHD. And this idea that she had was that we take our belongings, again, in a category, and divide them up into friends, acquaintances, and strangers. The process is this: you go through and you take a look at all of your category, or everything in your category, and you go through and you choose your friends. Which are the ones that are your friends? So let's say we're talking about books. Which are the books that just speak to you? Which are the ones that when you pick them up or you look at them, you feel warm and they're like a friend? Those are the ones you set aside, and those are going to be the ones you keep. Go through again and look at the books. Which ones are the strangers? These are the ones that, are just there. They have no meaning to you. They might be in bad condition or whatever. The strangers are definitely the ones that are going to go. And then the middle category are the acquaintances. Now, she argues that the acquaintances should be in your life temporarily, like acquaintances often are. They come into our lives temporarily, and then we let them go. So your friends are the ones you're going to keep forever. The strangers are the ones you're going to let go, and the acquaintances are the ones that you're going to have for a while. And then when you're done, you're going to donate them. So that's a really helpful strategy, and it feels a little less cold because you are talking about, friends and acquaintances, and it's almost like they're little people. So that's a potentially useful strategy. Another one is actually a strategy that two gentlemen known as the minimalists came up with. The minimalists are Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua Fields Milburn. And they have the 20-20 rule. And this one's really helpful for that category of stuff that you're hanging on to just in case. And their 20-20 rule is, if it can be replaced for under $20 and in fewer than 20 minutes, let it go. Because if you need it, it can be, you can get it again cheaply and quickly. But in that case, you don't need to be storing it for something that can be so easily replaced. So that's one of their strategies. And your specific number may vary depending on your price point you're comfortable with and the distance you may need to go in order to replace the item. So you may have 30, the 30-30 rule or the 40-40 rule, or your numbers may be different. I'm willing to drive for a half an hour and I'm willing to replace up to $50. So you can tweak that with whatever makes sense for you. But that's a potential strategy to help you think through, particularly that stuff that you're hanging on to just in case. Here's a really good one for the sentimental or guilt items. So there is a book, it was published in 2018, I believe, by Margarita Magnusson, and it's called The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. And in this one, the idea is the things that we save and we have in our lives are great for us, but eventually our children, our family members, someone else is going to have to deal with that stuff at a later time. And so the idea is we take care of all of that stuff ourselves and not burden the next generation or other family members with dealing with that. And so one of the questions that she suggests asking of your items is, will anybody be made happier because I saved this? And so if you're thinking through, your collection of, all of the artwork that your kids made over their grade school years, are your kids going to want all of that stuff? Maybe what they'd actually want is a nice little selection of curated things, the ones that are truly special or the ones that had some significance, but they may not want all of it. So the idea here is asking, who is someone going to be happy that I saved this for them, or is it going to be a burden? So that's another, again, that one works particularly well. Actually, it works for anything, but it works particularly well with our guilt or our sentimental items, because most of our loved ones probably aren't going to want to deal with everything we've ever owned in our lives. So they're going to want to not be burdened with that. And then the last one I want to share with you is one that was just published in Gretchen Rubin's Outer Order, Inner Calm book that just came out a week ago, I think. And this one is one of our stumbling blocks can be that we don't know where, how we're going to get rid of things or where things are going to go. And what she recommends, and I really like this, is decide your donation places before you start decluttering. So that way, think about the kinds of things that you have in your home. I have books, I have kids' toys, I have electronics, I have kitchen supplies. Think about, where am I going to take those before you start decluttering? Because that way, that when you're holding this object in your hand and you're really like, do I really want to get rid of it? You can very clearly imagine, no, I'm actually donating this to, the women's shelter. I'm donating this to, my church's auction. Oh, this is something that my son would has said he wants, so I'm giving that to him. So figuring out before you even touch an item where it is that you want it to go to is a really good strategy. I will say though, if you're planning on giving it to your children or other family members, make sure that they actually want it first, not just giving them your stuff, but if it's truly something that they want. But again, in thinking about where it is that you could take these things and who can benefit from them is a really helpful thing to keep in mind when you're faced with your own angst over, this object, and how are you going to get rid of it in a meaningful, positive, responsible way that can be very helpful. And then the other part of it is that once you've figured out where it is you want to donate it, then her strategy that she recommends is, and it's it's an expansion of the spark joy idea, but it's a little less, it's a little more concrete than spark joy, which is, do I need it? Do I love it or do I use it? So something like your roasting pan that you only use one time a year, but the one time a year you use it, you really need it. You want to keep that. You're going to want to keep it probably not in your primary real estate that's your kitchen, but you're going to want to keep it. So you don't want to get rid of that just because you only use it once a year. Because when you need it, you really need it. But look at, is this something beautiful? Is this something meaningful? Is it something special? Does it fall into the do I love it category? And then obviously the easiest one is do I use it? So is this something that has a meaningful role in my life right now in terms of how I live my life and the kinds of things I'm doing? So those are 5, and again, 6, because I snuck the spark joy in there too. But those are 5 strategies for helping to reframe so that when we're decluttering, we're not just thinking about, oh, I have to get rid of my stuff, which can be really difficult to work through. So those are my tips for the day. So hopefully one of these things will be useful for you. But I'll tell you, if none of these do the trick, leave me a comment. Let me know if there's an idea that I can throw some other ones out as well, or if there's something that has worked for you that you've been able to really be successful with. Share that in the comments. I'd love for other people to be able to see that as well. So thank you so much for joining, and I really appreciate the time spent listening to this. And I hope you guys all have a great rest of your evening, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.